Hey, it's Russell with SP, and today we're going to be looking at the basic maintenance and lubrication of the Shocker XLS bolt system. You won't need any tools for this service, simply a clean rag and some factory lubricant. As with any time you're working on a paintball marker, you want to make sure that the breech is clear of paint and that there's no air system attached to the marker. That way everything is clear and safe and ready for you to work. To start, we're going to eject the bolt system simply by pressing the bolt ejection button here at the base of the marker. You'll see the bolt ejects. You can draw it the rest of the way out and start to break it down into its smaller components for that service. With the bolt system out of the marker, we're going to go ahead and break it down into its 4 major components. To start, we're going to separate the bolt cap from the firing chamber. To do this, we're going to grip both pieces and unscrew. You'll notice that the bolt actually comes out inside of the bolt cap. So to separate that, we're going to press on the bolt face and pull on the bolt tail. You'll notice there's no twisting or unscrewing needed. They simply push and pull apart. Setting those aside, we're going to go ahead and get our bolt stop ready for service by removing it from the firing can. The bolt stop is this black Delrin piece that's located at the tip of the firing can. To remove it, I like to start one side with my fingernail and then the other side so it's even, and then pull it straight out. Again, no screwing or securement is needed. It simply slips into the firing can itself. So with those components broke down, we can now begin service. We have our bolt cap, our bolt itself, the bolt stop, and the firing can. Now you've noticed that I didn't need to break down the firing can any further for this service, and you generally won't need to for basic maintenance. We'll start the service by taking a look at the bolt cap itself. 2 external seals as well as the bolt bumper mark the outside, whereas on the inside we find a single 1770 O-ring. As far as cleanliness, we want to make sure that the 1770 on the front inside is clean and clear of any debris. Because this O-ring's in the front of the bolt kit, any debris that's inside the breech can work its way back and end up on this O-ring. In order to clean it, you would simply remove it, or in general maintenance, all you need to do is reach in with a rag and wipe away any debris and excess lubricant. We'll want to reach in through the back and clean out the inner bore as well, because this is where the bolt rides when it's cycling. So with that O-ring nice and clean and the inner bore clean as well, we can go ahead and lubricate the front inside O-ring. We're only going to use enough grease to fill in the 2 gaps on either side of the O-ring. A large amount of lubricant is not needed here, so you don't want to glob it on. Now because I reached in there with my finger, you can see some excess on the edge. I'm going to take my rag and just carefully wipe that excess off. If you forget this step, it's not a big deal, because any excess you have on the outside there will be shot out of the marker generally within the first couple cycles after you finish your service. The front black O-ring requires no lubricant, and these 2 white on the outside simply need a very light coating, as they're non-dynamic. They don't move, but they do slide in and out of the body and seal the bolt system to the body, so we want to give them a nice light coating so that the bolt system goes in and out with ease. So you can see here we have our lubricated front bore, we have our 2 external O-rings lubricated, but for right now we're not going to put any lube on the internal bore. We'll actually put that on the bolt system itself in a little bit. So with that completed, you can go ahead and set your bolt cap aside, and we'll move on to the bolt. The bolt itself is comprised of 2 parts that are assembled at the factory. You have the bolt tail and the bolt head. Because these parts are assembled with red Loctite at the factory, you should never attempt to disassemble the 2 parts from each other. Doing so will likely cause damage to one or both of the components. First of all, we're going to start by cleaning off any of the old grease, debris, dust, etc. on our bolt system. And now we'll take a look at the O-rings that are on the bolt itself. The O-ring all the way up towards the tip is a chamber sealing O-ring. This makes sure that when the bolt's in its forwardmost position, this chamber is nice and sealed so that all the air coming out of the bolt is driving the ball. This O-ring itself is not a static seal O-ring, so we won't be lubricating it when we do our service. The next O-ring you see here is the bolt bumper. What this does is it actually insulates the bolt from the cap when the bolt's in its forwardmost position. This O-ring, again, is not a sealing O-ring, but we want to make sure it's inspected so that it's structurally sound. Any type of peeling, cutting, or damage, and we want to replace that O-ring in order to maintain its properties as a bumper. The next O-ring on here is the bolt sail. This O-ring is the O-ring that the bolt rides on as it moves forward and back in the process of cycling. So this is a dynamic O-ring, and we'll want to make sure that it is clean and well lubricated when we put the bolt system back together. The two other O-rings on the bolt itself are the two tail O-rings, and again, they are dynamic, meaning that they move and they are riding inside a channel inside the firing can. So to start our lubrication process, we're going to go ahead and start there. Again, we're lubricating these O-rings just enough to fill the grooves on either side, but not so much that there's a glob anywhere. The next O-ring we're going to lubricate is our bolt sail. Again, lubing just enough to fill the grooves on either side. Now, we do not need to lubricate the bolt tip or the bolt bumper, but with whatever residue you have on your finger, go ahead and put it here on the O-ring land. What that's going to do is going to help work the lubricant into our bolt stop, which we'll get to in just a moment. So with this properly lubricated, we're going to go ahead and insert it into the firing can or the bolt cap, and you'll notice that some of that excess lube has already accumulated on the bolt tip here. I'm going to take my rag and just wipe that off. It wouldn't stay in place anyway because it would be shot down the barrel the very first time the bolt cycles. So in order to keep our barrel clean and lube to a minimum, we're going to just wipe off that excess. So with those components properly lubricated and assembled, we can move on to the bolt stop. The bolt stop is a small Delrin piece that presses into the firing can. You'll see that there is an internal O-ring. This is in fact a sealing and dynamic O-ring, so we're going to want to make sure that that is clean and well lubricated when we put it back together. And then on the outside you'll notice this black retention O-ring. Now this O-ring does not move, but it is important that it's there and that it does in fact have an integral seal. So we want to make sure that this O-ring is nice and clean, free of defects, and it is. So in order to service this, we're going to take our rag, clean out any lubricant and debris existing there. And as you can see, that cleans up just nicely. We're going to take a small amount of lubricant again and lubricate that inner O-ring quite thoroughly. Now I'm going to take my rag and just wipe off any of the excess that's on this edge. Again, most of that would be ejected within the first couple cycles after service. You'll notice I did not put any lubricant on the outer O-ring. What you can do, just to make it easier to get in and out, is just to put a very small amount on that O-ring. It is not necessary because the O-ring does not move, but it does make future disassembly a little bit easier. So with that lubricated inside and a little bit on the out, we're going to take our firing can and we're just going to slide it right back into place. Just like that. I generally will take a rag and clean off, again, the outside of the bolt cap, the bolt stop, but also I want to clean the threads to make sure that there's no debris, dust, or lubricant that got in these threads. It's not necessary that they be there, and it ensures that the threads will have nice smooth engagement when I put my bolt system back together. With the internal O-ring there lubed, I can now take my bolt cap and bolt itself and slide them together. After screwing the two pieces together, you see we have our bolt system completely back together. There are 3 more O-rings on the outside of the firing can, and we're going to treat those just like we did the front 2. Again, they're not dynamic, but a little bit of lube on them goes a long way to making the bolt system come in and out of the marker nice and smooth. So with those lubricated and ready to go, we can go ahead and slide it back into the marker. And you've completed your bolt service. Now, I generally recommend cycling the marker with just some air and a rag over the barrel, just to eliminate any of that excess lubricant from ending up in your barrel system.